For the past several months, we've been walking through the book of James line by line in a series called Authentic. And in this book, James has been writing to a scattered group of Jewish Christians throughout the Roman world. And I think one of my favorite questions that I get asked every week is like, hey, what are we talking about this week? Are we still in the book of James? I'm like, oh, yeah, for sure. We definitely have at least 2 more weeks after this. But it's fun. I love getting to open up the Word, to go through it kind of line by line like this. It gives the ability to let it speak, and just kind of taking a slow walk is fun. It's really enjoyable. And so what we have seen in this so far is that authentic faith, that it perseveres through trials, that it fights against temptation, that it obeys the word of the Lord, that it loves people impartially, that it produces good works in us, that authentic faith controls the tongue, that it seeks godly wisdom over earthly wisdom, that it rejects worldliness, that it submits to God in all things, and finally, that authentic faith recognizes that God is the one who is ultimately in control. And so last week, we were in James 4, 13 through 17, and we saw that there were these people seeking to control their own futures by confidently pursuing wealth, like not without any type of dependence on the Lord. And so in our passage today, James gives us another test of authentic faith. And he says, what does the way that we handle our money reveal about our faith? See, how we handle what God has entrusted to us reveals what we believe about him. And I think it's important to know some context going into this. So in the first century Roman world, it was very much so characterized by like very significant economic inequality. People that were so rich, and then people barely making it by. There was a small group of landowners around that time that would have been really wealthy and elite. They would have controlled the majority of the property and the resources in the area. At the same time, many of the ordinary people were living in survival mode. So having just enough resources to stay alive, but never to progress beyond that. Most of the workers in this time would have been agricultural, day laborers, or tenant farmers. And because of their lifestyle and their dependence on the wealthy landowners, they would have been very vulnerable. So when James speaks about wealthy landowners withholding wages from workers, he's not talking about a minor financial disagreement here. He's talking about people using economic power to exploit those who had less than them. And so that's the world that James is speaking into when he starts at our passage. So we're going to be in James 5. It's going to be on the screen behind us, so you can follow along in your own Bible. It says, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted. Your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you have kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous person, but he does not resist you." So this is a shift in the language that we have been looking at in the book of James. It switches and feels kind of similar to mirroring the Old Testament prophetic warnings of judgment that we would have seen then. This isn't his normal pastoral tone that he would have taken. And James isn't just like giving financial advice and to these rich people. What he's doing is exposing a heart problem and announcing God's judgment. This is a firm prophetic warning and a diagnostic check of authentic faith. One that makes us ask ourselves, how does the way that I steward my resources reveal about what I truly believe? And I think James is going to show us kind of three things. He's going to show us how our money reveals what we trust, how our money reveals like how we love other people, and how our money reveals what kingdom we are building. So the first thing is that our money reveals what we trust. I personally believe that money is one of the easiest false gods or false god traps for us to fall into. It can give us this illusion of control, of power, of protection, security, and comfort. We tend to start thinking, if I had this much in my bank account or this much in my 401k, then I would be financially secure. But in reality, the number keeps moving. We reach one financial goal, and then we go to another. And we think we are pursuing security, but actually we're becoming slaves to a false promise of security. And James knew this. The people that he's confronting had fallen into the illusion that their wealth was securing their future. And so James flips the script on him and he says, what you think is securing your future is actually building evidence against you. James says in verse 2 and 3, he says, your riches have rotted, your garments are moth-eaten, your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you. So there's these three powerful images there, these riches that have rotted, these clothes that are moth-eaten, and this gold and silver that is corroded. James says the injustice is clear. There are people surrounding you that are struggling to stay afloat. And while others have accumulated in abundance in such a way that they don't even know that their riches have rotted. Like, I don't know if you know this, but it would take a long time for moths to show up and completely rid your clothes and just rot away. So this is a big deal. So much of a gap that they did not notice that they're, there we go, where's the word? Destroyed and going away. The irony there is devastating because what we often think is creating greater security for us, for our future, and what they thought was creating greater security for them, for their future, was actually just storing evidence against them. But the problem here isn't simply the possession of wealth or resources. I think that's a bad interpretation if you go that way. The problem is they have hoarded wealth in a way that others have suffered as a result of it, often achieving and gaining this wealth at the expense of others. See, James wants us to know, the Lord wants us to know that what we do with our resources and how we go about obtaining them reveals the true nature and condition of our hearts. It reveals what has and has not been surrendered to Jesus. And our surrender is that our call is that everything should be surrendered to him, not just the parts that we want them to have. But money is a tool, right? It can be a great servant, but money is a terrible savior. It's a terrible master. It's true. It can produce some comfort, some opportunity, and some resources, but it cannot ultimately provide security. You could have all the resources in the world, all the fullest bank account, the best investment portfolios, and still be empty on the inside. You could have all the resources you need on this side of eternity, but be completely unprepared to stand before the Lord. And James says to these guys, you have laid up treasure in the last day. We're moving each day closer to the return of Christ. And he says, yet you people are attempting to accumulate wealth like you have unlimited time. And he says, we shouldn't be asking ourselves, how much can I accumulate before I die? We should be asking ourselves, what will I do with what God has entrusted to me before I stand before him? Who are we really trusting to care for us? Who are we really trusting to care for our future family members? Is it God or our own ability to accumulate wealth for ourselves and then pass it down? I don't want you to fall into the trap of letting your temporary possessions become your eternal priority. Everything on this earth will pass away, but the things of the Lord will never end. And our money reveals what we trust, what we do with it. And we just have to ask ourselves, are we trusting in what we have, or are we trusting in the God who gave it? The second thing that James wants us to know is that our money reveals how we love. He said, behold, the wages of the laborers who have mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. There's like injustice happening here. And James moves from what these wealthy people trusted to how they are now treating other people. How the pursuit of money and this hoarding of resources has led to the unjust treatment of those around us. These wealthy landowners employed all of these people who would work and run their fields. The workers had been doing their part. They mowed it, they tilled it, they planted the seed, they harvested the crop. They did whatever else was necessary. But while they held up their end of the deal, the wealthy landowners were withholding their wages. They were benefiting and growing rich from the labor of these people while refusing to give the workers what they were owed. James isn't simply condemning these rich landowners because they have more than someone else. He said the problem is that your prosperity is built upon the exploitation of others. He says you are benefiting from the labor of people and you are refusing to pay, and that is not okay. That is like inherently it is sinful. Taking advantage of these people is an injustice. And he's like, and I'm not going to stand against it. James says, the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts, which is not a small statement. The workers were struggling. They were barely making it. They felt powerless to change their situation and break free from bondage. They had no influence on their earthly situation, no resources to buy their way out, nothing to force the wealthy landowners to pay them. They were helpless. But I love this. But James says, God heard them. God heard them. The creator of the universe heard them. And he hears us when we cry out to him. And he deeply cares about us. Throughout the Bible, we see evidence of how God hears the cries of his people, how he hears the cries of the oppressed, and he moves forward in justice. We see countless times that God punishes Israel when they ignore the oppressed and allow injustice to reign in their country. The name the Lord of hosts pictures God as this divine warrior and judge. Psalm 46 speaks more to this, to God being the Lord of hosts, and I encourage you to go read it. But it says that God is the one who is with us in the fire, the one who is with us as a shelter, and the one who is with us in the storm and in the storms of life. And so while the rich may have had power on the earth, the workers had the attention of heaven. God hears the cries of the oppressed, and he sees what the powerful ignore. I take heart in knowing that one day God will right every wrong and correct every injustice. And if you feel like, if you're here and you feel like that person, like that you can relate to this worker who's been taken advantage of, whose voice felt like it did not matter, who has been treated as expendable, or you just felt like you have no power to change your situation, know this, that God sees you, God hears you, and that he cares. But don't forget this, God has already come to solve our greatest need, to die for our sins and be raised to defeat death and restore us into a right relationship with himself, something that we could never do on our own power. James doesn't just want us to know that God hears the oppressed. He wants us to examine our own hearts so that we make sure we are not in the same position as these wealthy landowners. To ask ourselves how we handle our resources, and is it in a way that reveals that we love people who were created in the image of God and they are worth value, or do we just see people as tools to get what we want, to accumulate the things that influence the power, the status, the resources that we want to achieve? He wants us to check ourselves before we get so far down this line of injustice that it's harder to turn back. And the third thing that I noticed as I was studying this passage this week is that our money reveals what kingdom we are building. James shows us that our money reveals what we trust. It reveals how we love other people. But it leads me to asking this question is like, are we building what kingdom are we building with what God has entrusted to us? Our financial decisions aren't merely financial, they're spiritual. So often we want to separate that part of our lives. We want Jesus and church and that style of our life over here, and then we kind of want to put our work, our money, our career, our possessions, and our relationship over here. And we're like, yeah, you can touch this Jesus stuff, but like not this, right? We want to compartmentalize that. But Jesus doesn't just want to be one compartment on your life or number one on your list. He wants to be the lens in which you see everything through, which is a lot more than just being the most important thing. It's like everything is viewed in lens of him. And this is why I know that how we handle our money and our resources is a discipleship and a kingdom issue and not just a financial one for us. How we go about earning money, conducting business, treating coworkers, or if you're a boss, employees, how we pay people, how we handle our debt, utilize our resources, how we go about pursuing profits or even budget can reveal what we believe about God and people. And most people become slaves to money because they value it too highly. But others, we can become slaves to money and to debt by not treating it with enough regard. Remember, James is not condemning them because they had money. He's condemning them because money had become their master. And money is a good servant, but a terrible master. And their money had become a tool for selfishness and injustice instead of stewarding something for the building of the kingdom. And so here's the warning. When our resources become all about us, like these wealthy landowners, we can become blind to the people around us. We can become so focused on getting more, keeping more, and enjoying more that we stop asking ourselves, how can God use what he's given to me to help someone else? Our time, our talents, our treasures. And that's the danger that James is exposing when we start to make it all about us. But the opposite is also true. When we see our resources as something that God has entrusted to us, our financial decisions become opportunities for worship. It's then that we begin to ask ourselves questions like, how can I honor God with what I have? How can I treat people more fairly in the marketplace? How can I be generous? How can I use my time, talents, treasures, and all these resources to help someone who is hurting? How can I leverage what God has given me to build his kingdom? And that's when the question changes from what can this money do for me to what can I do, or what can God do through me with what he's entrusted? I like to think about it this way. There's a difference between a reservoir and a river. So a reservoir is designed to hold water. A river is designed to carry water pretty much somewhere else. God does not bless us so that we can become reservoirs, that we're people that only accumulate, store, and keep. And this goes beyond just physical possessions. Like you could have the truth, the knowledge, the love of the gospel inside of you and just accumulate more knowledge about the Bible, but never share it, right? God blesses us so that we can become rivers, people through whom which his blessings flow to others. And so what we want to do is we don't want to let his blessings stop with us. We want to let them flow through us to the other people around them. And so imagine there's two people and I don't know, make $5,000 a month. And one person looks at that money and says, okay, how much can I keep? The other one says, well, how much can I buy? What can I get to make my life more comfortable? And the other person two says, okay, God, this belongs with you. How do I honor you with the amount that I have been given? How do I provide for my family? How do I live generously? How do I help people in need when the time comes? How can I use what you've given me to make a difference in the kingdom? See, the difference is that perspective and that point of view. It has nothing to do with how much money like we make or how much resources we do. It's who we believe owns it. For these wealthy landowners, it was all about them. Well, what does that actually look like to let God's blessings flow through us? And so I want to give you like these 4 questions to kind of wrestle with, and ones that I have been thinking about this week. It's like, how do I earn? Am I making money in a way that honors God and honors people, or am I like stepping on other people to get ahead? Am I being honest? Am I treating other people as they were created in the image of God with respect and dignity? Am I cutting corners to get ahead? Is my pursuit of profit or like a higher title causing someone else to suffer? My coworkers, my family. It's like, oh, great, you make $400,000 a year, but your kids know nothing about you, right? We don't want to do that either. And so remember, God cares not only what we do with our money, but how we go about obtaining it. And that, I think that was clear in how he addressed the landowners. But then I started asking myself, well, how do I live? Am I using God's resources to live more responsibly, or am I using them just to consume more? And we have to ask ourselves, like, how much is enough? Am I living beyond my means? Is my lifestyle driven by contentment or comparison? Am I buying things because I need them, or do I just want to keep up? Has my standard of living risen faster than my generosity? Because it's not nice. It's not wrong to have nice things or to enjoy them. Sometimes it's better to spend a little bit more money on something that's going to last. You heard it, buy twice, cry twice, right? But we have to ask ourselves, am I becoming so comfortable that I'm getting insulated and I've stopped noticing the needs of others? A discipline that Sarah and I picked up early on in our marriage after reading a book in college, and this was a fun thing to pitch to her, was like setting an income cap. It's like, hey, I don't need to make more than this to do this. And you have another kid, you can adjust it and go. But it's a good principle that kind of like keeps things in check. And then I was like, okay, how am I earning? Am I going about in an honest way? Am I living in a way that's beyond my means or within that, my stewardship? And it's like, how do I give? Does generosity have a place in my life? And I ask myself, and I think we should ask ourselves, am I intentionally generous? Like, do I give God my first and my best, or do I just kind of give him what's left? It's like, is generosity something I plan to do, or something that I do like occasionally? And then it's like, okay, well then who has God already placed in my sphere of influence that I can help? And if generosity only happens when we have extra, you may never become generous. Generosity has to become a decision before it becomes a feeling. And then I ask myself, how do I build? Am I using my resources to build my kingdom for Landon or God's kingdom? And it's like the ultimate question I think here is, what are my resources accomplishing beyond making my life more comfortable? Is that all it does, is make me more comfortable on a normal basis? Or is it building something greater? Is it helping people hear the gospel? Is it helping people find community? Is it helping families that are struggling or are vulnerable? And like the local churches in the area, like they do a lot of that stuff. Is it helping missionaries reach and talk to people across the globe? Or any kind of kingdom work? Because in the reality is like my money is going somewhere. The question I just have to ask myself is, what kingdom is it building? But here's where I want to be careful, and very careful. Because if we're not careful, we can hear a sermon like this and walk away thinking, I just need to be better with money. But that's not the gospel. The gospel isn't try harder to be generous. The gospel is that Jesus has already given everything for you, everything that you need. The people in James 5 had made their wealth their treasure. They trusted it, they hoarded it, and they used it to serve only themselves. But the gospel gives us a completely different picture. Jesus had everything, yet he gave it all. He did not use his power to take from us. He used his power to serve us. He didn't hold on to riches, but he became poor for your sake and for mine. He gave himself for people who could never repay him. And he went to the cross for us as sinners when we had nothing to offer him. And he died in our place and rose again so that we could be reconciled with God, our largest need that we will ever have. Because our greatest treasure isn't what we have in our hands. Our greatest treasure is the one who gave himself to us. And when Jesus becomes your treasure, and we finally hold everything else with an open hand, because we're able to do that because we realize we didn't have to earn God's favor. We give and we are generous people because in Christ we have already received everything that we can ever need. We've already received an abundance of grace that we can never earn. And we don't steward our resources to prove that we're good enough for God. You're not going to just be like, God's not like, man, that Dave Ramsey guy, I love him. Like, he's number one, right? No, you steward our relationship, or you steward the things that God has given us because Jesus has already given us what we could never earn for ourselves. And so don't let God's blessings stop with you. Let them flow through you. Use what God has given you to honor him. Use it to love people. Use it to care for the vulnerable. Use it to strengthen the church or advance the gospel. Use it to build the kingdom. Because one day, everything that we have accumulated on this earth will be gone. But Jesus will remain. His kingdom will remain. And the treasure that we have in him will never perish. So the question isn't how much can I keep? The question is, God, how can I use what you've entrusted to me? Because how we handle our money and what God has entrusted to us reveals what we believe about him. And when Jesus has our hearts, everything else can be held with an open hand.